Alright, well, hello everybody. Today we're joined by John Padgett, former CCC recon man. Medic, my mistake, and also Operation Tailwind veteran. Hello, Mr. Padgett.
Good evening.
Now, Mr. Padgett here has been able to join us before, but sadly we have some issues with the video. But he's back, and we're welcoming him today. Mr. Padgett, how are you doing?
We're well, thank you. As I told you offline, I'm celebrating the 80th birthday today, so I'm in a celebratory mood. And very nice to speak with you.
That's great to hear, sir. I see in your room you have this is a different room than last time, I see.
That's correct. My wife and I are blessed to be able to have two houses, and I'm in a different house this time. I have my study here, what I call my man cave and I love me room. It's kind of a museum, actually, but it reflects my lifetime.
I see you have some photos in the back.
Yeah, I have photos. On one wall, I have a collection of patches. One of the frames of patches is CCC patches. I actually designed two of them for the Hatchet Force Companies C and D, and then I have a Special Commando Unit Indigenous patch and the CCC patch. I'm proud of those. They're all original.
Well, yeah, of course. All right, we'll start. So, Mr. Padgett, as we know, was on a Mike Force before he got into SOG. Can you tell us about your time on the Mike Force?
Mike Force was good. Back right after TET of 1968, it was decided that there should be another Mike Force battalion stood up in the Quy Nhon area of Vietnam. And I was lucky enough to be selected to be part of that team to start the Mike Force battalion, 4th battalion of the 2 Corps Mike Force. And the way we stood up the companies is that there was one company who was selected from the Vietnamese population, mostly CIDG from one or two of the camps that was closing, and another company of Montagnard troops, which were selected right from the Montagnard population in the highlands. We went up to a camp called Phu Tuc. This was somewhat unique in that it was a Montagnard camp, and the LLDB, or the Vietnamese Special Forces team up there, was all indigenous Montagnard. So the American Special Forces team and the LLDB team got along very well. The Americans and the Montagnards had a special relationship. But we went up to the camp, the Special Forces camp, and we met with some indigenous, some Montagnard tribal leaders, and they asked us what we were there for, what we wanted. And we told them about wanting to recruit a Mike Force company. And they asked us how many men we needed, and we told them that we'd like to interview or look at about 120 men for the second company. And they looked at us and they said, in 2 days, we will have 150 men for you on the airstrip at dawn. and they did. 2 days later, we got in the Jeep at dawn and went out to the airstrip, and there in formation were approximately 150 Montagnards. Now, you may have heard of an organization called FULRO, which was the Montagnard Independence Movement in Vietnam. They were quite active and had their own militia, if you will, which was basically a resistance organization against the lowland Vietnamese. But at any event, we had the men standing out on their airstrip. They had their own leadership, and we selected the men we wanted, and basically kept the leadership positions. And the other 30 or so just faded back into the jungle, and we began the recruitment process and the training.
You said Phu Quoc, right? That's the island.
FULRO, FULRO, which was an abbreviation for the French, and I can't
Yeah.
give you the exact words, but it was an abbreviation for the French name for the independence organization.
Uh, I meant the island you were recruiting them from, the LODB camp.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
The island. I mean the place you recruited your 150 men from. Where was it again?
Yeah, it was a camp called Futuk,
Futok.
which is in the central highlands of Tukor.
I see. Did you recruit from Tukor often?
Yes, that that group of Montagnards became the second company. The first company was composed mostly of Vietnamese and some Cham, another ethnic group in Vietnam, ancient people, but and had a Cham empire for maybe 100 years or so there on the coast of Vietnam. But there was a camp called Vintan, which closed. It was a special forces camp. And the Vietnamese took over the camp, and the strikers, or the civilian irregular defense group, troops, many of them came and formed the first company of Montagnards for our Mike Force. So we had actually two companies, one company of Vietnamese, one of Montagnards, and then a reconnaissance platoon, which was mixed. One might think that the two companies might not get along, but they were comrades in every way.
Your reconnaissance section. Were they separate teams or were they just one large team itself?
There was a reconnaissance platoon and mixed Montagnards, Vietnamese, and some Cham as well.
Did they separate the platoon to teams when they went out on operations, or did the whole platoon go on recon?
Yeah, basically, they went on operations with us. Sometimes they would perform the reconnaissance role, and sometimes they'd be attached to one or the other companies. It was rare, though, that they went out by themselves. Usually, we had backup for them, the battalion, basically.
If we can go back to Tukor, from what I know, most yards were recruited from Tukor because
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Last night I was talking to Marcus B. Witt, as you know, and he told me the Rade he recruited was from Tukor.
Yeah, the Tukor contained a good portion of the Central Highlands. Now, if you know your geography of South Vietnam, the Central Highlands were kind of a spine that ran down the country from the beginning north of in I Corps all the way down to 3 Corps, where the Mekong Delta started. The border area was included in the Central Highlands. But Rade, yes, Jurai, Sedang, Benar, and others. The Jurai tribe was primarily around Futuk where we recruited, but certainly there were other tribal members who were members of the Mike Force.
If we can continue, on the Mike Force, you said you were involved in the operation and where you would strike against the VC or were attacked by the VC.
The sound here is bad.
Sorry. As I was saying, have you tried increasing your volume, sir?
Have I tried?
Increasing your volume?
Yeah. Basically, this is the best I can get, I think.
All right, it's fine, sir. Can you hear me now?
Pretty well, yes.
All right. So, as I was saying, for your Mike Force time, do you have any memories of Mike Force other than the operations?
Oh, plenty. Where does one begin? One of the great memories was of these the Fuller organization sending us the troops and having them in formation when we went to recruit them. We built a camp in Quy Nhon. I don't know how we got this area, but there was a Vietnamese transportation company that moved and left us a compound, and there wasn't much in it, and we had to start from scratch. And we had had trouble with the water supply. Basically, we had none, and brought in water from nearby camps, go and fill bladders and so forth. So to get a water tower going, we got an old abandoned fuel trailer. One of the things you see towed around by trucks to refuel the vehicles. But the problem was, of course, that you can't put water in something that's been used for fuel because you get the residue of the JP4 or whatever it is. So for about a solid week or 10 days, we had 6 or 8 Montagnards inside the fuel trailer, scrubbing it out with scrub brushes, soap, and water. And we were told that would never do. But sure enough, they scrubbed it clean of all the residue of the fuel, and we flushed it out a couple of times, and that actually served as our water tower. It was pretty good. So we built that camp and secured it. It was good. There were a number of memories of combat operations, of course, for the Mike Force, but that was a good one. And back then, for morale purposes, our companies had their individual scarves, little bandanas that they would wear around their neck. The Vietnamese company was, I believe, it was blue and yellow, and the Montagnard companies was black and red. And what the Americans did was took 2 of these bandanas, split them down the middle, and sewed the pieces together so that we showed no preference. We had the Montagnard company and the Vietnamese company bandanas around our necks as one piece.
All right. But as I was saying, I heard the bandanas, right? Were they separate colors, or did they have different designs on them that separated them?
No, they were just, as they say, well, the Vietnamese company had a blue bandana with yellow trim, and the Montagnard company had a black with red trim. And as I say, we split both of them down the middle and sewed the pieces together so that we had both bandanas as one, indicating both companies working together.
Did they wear these bandanas like around their necks or wrapped around their head?
Yeah, around their neck. And they would usually wear them in garrison and not on operation, although sometimes they did.
How often was that, sir, or was that regulated by leadership?
No, I can't remember exactly how they came about, but they were there. There were a lot of informal stuff that went on, that weren't really authorized by anybody. But as they say, it's better to beg permission, beg forgiveness, than ask permission.
So this was your first tour in Vietnam, or your second tour?
Yeah, my first tour was April of '67, April of '68, and the Mike Force started up about late February. So it was just before my first tour ended. All in all, I spent about 3.5 years in Southeast Asia.
So your second tour was when you got to SOG, am I correct?
No, it's not correct. The second tour was mostly Mike Force.
I see. So
from April to April 68, 68 through July of 69, at which time I went to Thailand for a year, Special Forces camp there, and then came back in 1970 and spent 70-71 with CCC, SOG.
In Thailand, was it the 46th Special Forces Company?
That's correct. I was at a camp called Nong Taku, which was central Thailand, basically in the mountainous area. And the mission there was to train, should I say, third country troops. And my mission was to run a dispensary there, medical civic action. I had a very nice dispensary. I had 8 beds, I had a lab, small laboratory where I could check for malaria and other things, and an X-ray machine. And I would take all comers from the civilian population. They would line up in the morning, and we'd work through the afternoon. And I joke and I say that there were two American organizations in Thailand authorized to do medical civic action on the populace. One was the Fifth Field Hospital in Bangkok, and the other was me.
That's funny, sir. If you don't mind, if I share my screen real quick.
Sure.
Okay. That's odd. It's fine. We can handle that later. Let's continue, sir. So your third tour, you gone to SOG, or your fourth tour, around there?
Yeah, third, I guess. I just kept extending my enlistment and my time in Vietnam. I believed in the mission. I believed in what we were doing. I was with some really good people, both indigenous and American, and saw no reason to leave.
So you're more, you serve very long. Most SOG men only serve one to two tours. You're here 3 tours in Vietnam.
Yeah, you'll find some of the SOG guys, especially, who served more than one tour, very mission oriented. I finally determined that the United States wasn't serious about winning the war. When I saw the withdrawal happening, the pull out, the phase down, all of this stuff, and the quote unquote Vietnamization going on, and the Vietnamese armed forces in a large part were not ready to take over the war. But I understood that the United States was politically didn't have the will to continue the fight or win it. So at that time, I determined that was it for me. There was no use my dying for something that didn't matter, essentially.
You talking about Vietnamization, am I correct?
Yes.
So that converted the special forces camps into border ranger groups, and then they had the South Vietnamese special forces take over.
Yes, most of the special forces camps that were run or were, should I say, supervised or occupied by American Special Force were converted to Vietnamese Rangers. If you remember the way that the command and control was structured in the Special Forces camps, was that the American Special Forces team was really advisors. Certainly, when it came to combat, the Vietnamese listened to us and mostly took orders from us. But on paper, the Vietnamese Special Forces were in command. The American Special Forces team were advisors, and the civilian and regular defense group, or the indigenous troops, were recruited from the areas around the camps. So when it came time to close the camps, the Vietnamese basically moved their LLDB, or the Vietnamese Special Forces, either moved them out or converted them to Rangers, Vietnamese Rangers, and the indigenous troops who stayed in the camps converted to Rangers from CIDG.
You were stationed in FOB 2 in Kontum, right?
That's correct. My tour in CCC was at FOB 2.
Do you remember anything about the what did they call it again? Strategic Technical Directorate. That's what they called it. The South Vietnamese equivalent to SOG.
No. Basically, I worked with the American SOG team. What we had for our indigenous troops were the Special Commando Unit. We called them SCU, SCU, Special Commando Unit. And as far as any Vietnamese command and control, the only Vietnamese military unit that I remember that worked with us was the Vietnamese Air Force flying the King B helicopters. Remember that the SOG Special Operations Group, both FOB 1, 2, and FOB 3, were all run by Americans. There was no indigenous command and control there.
So that was the 219th King Bee, am I correct?
I believe so, yeah. I couldn't call the number.
Oh, I think I share my screen here. Here we go. Alright, here. So this was the 46th Special Forces Company?
That's correct.
And was this...
That's Thailand now.
And this is Thailand here? I believe this is an article written by someone who served. I'm unsure myself if there are anything. Did you have an aviation section for the 46 Special Forces, sir?
Not to my knowledge. I think we were supported by Air Force units, but as far as our own aviation section, no.
I see. And the other...
Again, I was... what you showed me, I think, was for the SAW guys who were stationed out of northern Thailand and would go into Laos from northern Thailand. That wasn't me. As I say, my primary mission was to take care of people in central Thailand at a special forces camp. And, basically I was a cover. The real mission was to train indigenous third country folks from another country and send them back to work against the communists. But my dispensary was very busy, seeing 800 to 1,000 patients a month. And that was a justification for us being there, although that wasn't the real mission.
The launch site you were talking about is, was it NKP, Nakhon Phanom? If that's...
Nakhon Phanom,
yeah.
Correct.
And was that, I remember that's the exploitation company that launched out of that.
Again, things were very compartmentalized. I really had no knowledge of what was going on up there. I had my own mission to do, my own job, and I did it. And I only learned about what was going on in northern Thailand as far as crossing the fence into Laos when I got back to Vietnam and went to CCC. But while I was there, I knew nothing about what was going on up north.
How did you get interested into SOG? Was it just rumors you heard, and then you joined SOG by volunteering?
That's essentially correct. During my first couple of years in Vietnam, I would hear things about SOG, nothing concrete. And most of the things I heard were when I would get off site, get out of the Mike Force compound, for example, and go to Saigon for whatever, maybe a couple of days off or something, or go to Nha Trang to re-enlist or whatever it might be. It would run up against other guys, especially in the club, and you sit and you have a beer or whatever, and you talk and exchange tales. And I would hear about these things, but I didn't have any concrete knowledge of SOG. Again, it was very compartmentalized. It was a need-to-know basis, a top-secret organization, and if you didn't need to know, you didn't know. So finally, my third tour in Vietnam, I got into SOG.
When did you first arrive into FOB2, and how did you get picked for FOB2, or was it just assigned to you?
I wanted to go back to Vietnam from Thailand, and at the time, the troop strength was being drawn down, and that includes Special Forces, and Special Forces was in a process of the 5th Special Forces Group was going to be relocated back to Fort Bragg shortly, and it looked like I couldn't get back to Vietnam. So there was a lady working at the Pentagon in the Personnel Bureau who was very close to Special Forces. Her name was Billy Alexander. And it was known among us that if we wanted an assignment of whatever type, Vietnam or Panama or wherever, we should talk to Mrs. Alexander if we couldn't get it through normal command channels. So I actually wrote to Billy Alexander and asked her, I'd like to go back to Vietnam. And sure enough, she wrote back and said, okay, you're assigned back to Vietnam. Just basically bypassing the chain of command and going right to the Pentagon, to the civilian personnel people and the people that control the assignments. So, she helped me get back to Vietnam. And I went back and reported into Nha Trang, Special Forces Headquarters, and said, here I am, use me. And the Sergeant Major at the time said, where would you like to go? And I said, I've been through the CCC compound on the road. It was split between two sections with the road going through, and I've been by there, and I always wanted to see what was going on, so send me there. And he said, I can guarantee you a Purple Heart or a body bag, or maybe both. And I said, it's all right, send me up. So he did, and I went up there, and I was the senior medical NCO. I reported into the dispensary, and the senior NCO, the NCOIC for the dispensary, was leaving, and he said, welcome, you're it. You're the medical supervisor. And I said, okay, and off I went.
So, in SF training group, you are a medic, right?
Special Forces Training Group, medical training, correct.
And how long did the training take for medics?
Oh, let's see. After one would go through is the basic stuff, basic training, advanced individual training, jump school. After that, if you were selected for Special Forces, you would go to Fort Bragg. And at that time, you would go before the committee and they would ask you what you wanted to do. Now, in my case, they told me that my testing was high enough where I could select what I wanted to do. And I said to myself, well, where can I serve the best? And I figured, well, I can make friends for my country, I can relate well to the indigenous, and I can serve my team best by being a medic. And that I told them that I'd like to go to medical training, and they signed me up. And it took a while to collect enough people to go to medical training. In other words, they didn't just send us one by one. We had to wait to gather up a bunch of folks who were going to be in medical training, and then we would go on a chartered aircraft down to Fort Sam Houston, which is what happened to me. So I was there at Fort Bragg waiting to get transportation for a few weeks. And finally we got 55 of us together, and there was an aircraft chartered, and off we went to Fort Sam Houston. Now, what they did was send us through basic medic training first. I guess the thought was if the guys flunked out, they would at least have a basic medic, went through basic medic training. So we all went through that, and we zipped through there. It was pretty easy for us. And then we went, after we finished that, we went right away to what we call 300 F1, or Special Forces Medical Training, the classroom phase. And we knew they were serious when on the first day a full bird colonel walks in to be our first instructor. That got our attention, most of us being privates. And it went from there. But I will tell you, the training was great, both didactic and lab. It was really good. And we lost some people there. Some people flunked out. They just couldn't make the training, couldn't relate to it, couldn't understand it or whatever. And actually, some guys got involved with some of the WACs, the Women Army Corps ladies, who were in barracks not far from our classroom. So boys will be boys and girls will be girls, and people got together. And unfortunately, some people concentrated on the extracurricular stuff instead of their training. But not being the sharpest knife in the drawer, I had to study and study hard. But I did. And I had a study buddy who worked with me, and we would quiz each other. And after hours, we would come up with our own testing and so forth to make sure that we knew the material. And lo and behold, I managed to move through the training and go to on-job training, the next phase.
You were in OVP2, which had a road running through it, straight through the camp. Do you have any concerns about safety about that?
No, because the road was blocked in the evenings. About sundown, there were barricades put up, and that was that.
So it was this exact road right here, right, sir?
Let's see. As soon as the picture clears, yes.
And was this a part of the camp over here? Was it the indigenous family housing?
Let's see. We've got
This area over here, sir?
Yeah, I'm looking. Yeah, I would say more or less. Right back. Can you see my cursor?
Let's see. No, I can't. All right. Oh, sorry, sir. I can't with.
Okay.
I can't.
Yeah, where you got yours, there was just very, to the best of my memory, there wasn't any formal indigenous housing, that is, that we would put up or maintain or support. But there were families up there. Also, in that area, there were a couple of, well, at least one bar set up where the guys would walk out and have a little entertainment, if you will.
Would you ever go to that bar, sir?
Well, yeah, I would go up there and have a drink or two. I have a great story for you, though, about that.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, you would go to these little bars, and they would be set up and have cooler of beer, and some girls there that would come and try and entice you to have more than a beer. But I refrained from that. Being the medic, I knew what would happen. And I remember sitting out there one afternoon, and now when a mission was successful and the recon team would withdraw, a lot of times they would go over the camp, and instead of doing a victory roll like a fighter would do, they would pop smoke. They would attach the smoke grenades to the skids of the helicopter, the Hueys, and they would go over the compound as trailing smoke, either purple or red or whatever it was. Just kind of a victory thing, that the mission was good and they were all safe and so forth. Well, one afternoon I was sitting out there having a beer and a couple of guys around me, and there was one of the girls sitting at the table, and one of the helicopters went over real low, and they were trailing purple smoke. And the girl said, "Well, that must be RT New York coming back from Hotel Tango 5. I looked at her because it was so funny, because everything was so hush-hush in the compound. I mentioned the need to know stuff. And if you would get a mission briefing, you would go into the bunker, which the bunker was about 3 stories down into the dirt, into the ground, downstairs. And you would go down to the 3rd floor underground, and your badge would be checked and so forth to make sure that you were who you were and you belonged there. And you would go down, and the map would be covered up by a poncho liner curtain, and finally the curtain would be withdrawn, and you would get your briefing. Everything was top secret and need to know only, right? And here's this bar girl giving one of the code names of one of the landing zones and telling us which team was coming back on the helicopter. I mean, it was pretty funny. So, I'm thinking, well, the cover is blown, but we carried on.
Were those girls trusted by the SOG Recon man?
I'm sorry, were they what?
Were they trusted by SOG Recon men and SOG men in general?
Yeah, I mean, they were girls that worked at the bar, and guys would come down and have beers, and it sounded to me like there were some loose lips.
Well, that's definitely funny stories here. That
Yeah.
a bunch of our girls learned about SOG teams. Um, if I remember, CCC Control Central ran, was it Slam Companies? What was it called? Slam Companies?
We had exploitation force companies or hatchet force companies. Now, when I got there, we had Company A and Company B, and these were what we called hatchet force, and their mission was to exploit targets. Now, if a recon team went in and found something juicy, like an enemy headquarters or big cache or something that was ripe for the taking, and there wasn't that much of an enemy presence around, they would go in and what we call service the target, and then to get out quickly. They would go in with minimal food and water and all that, and mostly ammunition, and go in and kick butt and take names, and then leave as quickly as they came. Also, if one of the recon teams was in trouble, and we could reinforce them with a hatchet force company, we would do that, try and extract them, and then everybody would leave. So it was basically go in fast, go in hard, a lot of ammunition, kick butt, take names, and get the hell out. Then when I was there, after a few months, I was asked if I wanted to help stand up two more hatchet force companies, Company C and Company D. This was going to happen across the river from the main compound in the old Mike Force compound. Now, at this time, the Mike Forces were being drawn down and basically deactivated, and the Mike Force compound, therefore, was empty. And a lot of the troops were now available to become SOG guys, indigenous SOG troops. So, yeah, I agreed to do that and went over to start a dispensary at this compound and help train up the new companies.
Can you tell me? We know that Mr. Padgett here was a veteran of Operation Tailwind. Can you tell me your personal memories of what happened on that day or days?
Now, you speak of Operation Tailwind?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, Operation Tailwind was an operation. You probably know the background of this, but basically the Central Intelligence Agency had their own troops in Laos, indigenous troops, the quote-unquote secret army, and they were moving on a town in southern Laos to try and take it back from the North Vietnamese. And what they wanted CCC to do was send in troops to block the Ho Chi Minh Trail for 24 hours so that they didn't have to worry about the North Vietnamese reinforcing their troops in this town, so that they could successfully take the town and then resist any troops coming after them. So off went the troops from Company B of CCC, and my friend Gary Michael Rose was later a recipient of the Medal of Honor for actions on this mission. But they went in and landed. They went in the furthest to the furthest extent that any of our troops from command and control had been into Laos, about 33 kilometers inside the border. And they almost immediately became engaged with the North Vietnamese and had running fight for 3 days or more. And my involvement was that I was asked to go into the operational area on a helicopter and see if I could get some of the wounded out. The concept was that one of the large Marine Corps helicopters would go into the area, pick up the most seriously wounded, that myself and my junior medic on the helicopter would begin treatment of the wounds in the helicopter, would fly them out to medical care, and see how many we could save. So we went in. We staged out of Dock Toe. The Marine Corps helicopters came in to pick us up, and off we went into the Operation Tailwind area. We got close, by the way, when we were on our way into the area. We received anti-aircraft fire from North Vietnamese anti-aircraft artillery. Got through that, went into the hover mode on the landing zone that the Hatchet Force guys selected for us. And the ground fire became so intense and so many holes started appearing in the helicopters that the pilot had to pull up and leave. And it was tragic because I was at the back end of the tailgate and leaning down to try to grasp one of the wounded. And John Brown, my junior medic, had me by the belt, and I was leaning out to try and pick up this guy, and we just couldn't reach him. It was about 12 feet or so off the ground when the pilot had to pull pitch, and he did, and he pulled up, and he left at a pretty steep angle out of the landing zone, and as he was leaving, a B-40 rocket came through the bottom of the helicopter, punctured the gas tank on the top, and through and through, and out it went, and didn't explode. Of course, if it did, I wouldn't be talking to you. But then we limped. Then I saw this, and I saw that the crew chief was looking out the door of the helicopter and didn't see it. And I tapped him on the shoulder, banged him on the shoulder. Things were really loud and hectic, and there was still gunfire. And he looked at me like he was pissed at me that I would tap him on the shoulder. And I pointed to the gasoline coming down from the tank. And I saw his eyes get really wide, and he got on the microphone and to the pilot. And we limped about maybe 10 kilometers, I don't know for sure. But we sat down in the middle of a North Vietnamese fortification, which, thank the Lord, was empty. Nobody was home. So I got all the guys from the crew into a defensive position there. And after about 20 minutes or so, another helicopter, CH-53, came, dropped a rope ladder to us. And I held the rope ladder with one hand, and I motioned to the guys, get up this thing. Come on, get up. Because, being the guy in charge, I wasn't going to go up there myself first. And nobody moved. Nobody moved. I said, well, screw this, follow me. And up I went, and they got the message, and they followed me up. So we went, but as that helicopter was hovering, it was taking fire as well. So we limped probably about another, I would say 30, 40 kilometers, and they put down again. And finally, after another couple hours, Slicks came in, Hueys came in, and evacuated us and got us back to Dock Toe. So that was the failed rescue mission. And then the weather closed in on these guys. Couldn't get back in for another 24 hours or so. And then again, they said, okay, we're going to try it again. So we did. And again, there was more anti-aircraft and so forth. But I was able to get in that time. The helicopter was able to land. I was able to get wounded. And we got out and got back to friendly lines.
Can you tell me some background on this photo taken on Operation Tailwind of SOG men hanging out of a CH-53?
Yeah. The guy closest to the helicopter on the rope ladder is me.
That's you.
Yeah. Remember I told you that I said, follow me? And
yeah.
Went up? And did, and there I was. And I remember that these rope ladders, they can be lowered or raised, of course. And when I first got on the rope ladder and went up, I actually went up into the tailgate area, and I was going to hook on up there. And the guy said, no. He said, you hook on, but we're going to, he motioned with his hand, things are going down. So I got up there, but I was actually lowered a little bit, as you can see on the picture.
Do you notice the Cobra gunship below you?
Did I know they were there?
Yeah.
Not at the time. No, I was struggling because I was face first into the ladder, if you will, facing the ladder, and I was trying to get my car 15 where I could shoot when we were being lifted out. But I being on the ladder like I was, it was very difficult to get that weapon to bear on the ground where I wanted it to be. So I wasn't able to do that. But thank heavens we all got out of there.
But this photo really reflects how insane SOG operations were.
Oh yeah,
Hanging out
picture.
Ropes. I know you have told me this, but the audience doesn't know this. What would you carry and your equipment on operations as a bright light member and also just a medic over the fence?
My mission when I went over the fence was medical, was to help retrieve any wounded and help suppress any enemy who were after our guys, basically. So I would have a heavy, when I say heavy, I would have a trauma kit that was not designed for anything else but to treat wounds. IV fluid, bandages, ACE wraps, gauze, roller gauze, Vaseline gauze, in case of second chest wounds. I would have, and then I would have copper sulfate in case of white phosphorus wounds. It's basically a trauma kit. Now, again, it couldn't be too heavy, or I couldn't move with it. I couldn't function very well, but used an M5 bag to carry all this stuff. Then, of course, I had my own stuff to fight with. I had my Car 15. I had plenty of spare magazines. I had 1 or 2 canteens of water in case we couldn't get back on the helicopter right away and we're stuck there. And I had my little pocket flare, some mini grenades, and 1 or 2 smoke grenades.
And where would you carry this equipment?
Well, of course, the Car 15 was in my hands. Usually I had a sling because if I had to drop the weapon to get to my medical supplies, I could just push the weapon to my back on the sling. But the M5 bag would be either in my hand or on my back. Mini grenades came in a little bandolier of them, so I would have that strapped. I would also have a bandolier of M16 20-round magazines. I can't remember how many came in a bandolier, but I think there were 6 or 8 pockets for magazines. We would have canteen pouches also for magazines, spare magazines. I would have one standard ammo pouch, which had the side compartments, besides straps where you could strap a grenade, and a smoke grenade and a regular grenade would be there for me anyway. And then my canteens would be in the back.
But this equipment, it would be very light, of course, because your role wasn't just to stay there. You just went in and then you got out. Am I correct?
That's correct. But if the helicopter was taking too much fire and had to leave, or was shot down, heaven forbid, but sometimes it happened. I mean, in other words, if we had to stay and fight, then I needed sufficient ammo and equipment to do that.
And you wore a stable harness.
Say again?
A stable harness? Stable harness?
Yeah, that's correct. The web gear was composed of a stable harness and belt, so that if you had to get out on strings, you could.
All right. Here we go. This here is the M5 medical bag. Is this correct?
That's correct. Yes, it is.
And
yeah, that's real clandestine, isn't it? With the U.S. on the front of it.
Yeah. Well, was yours sterile?
Well, I put some black spray paint on it. Yeah, it wasn't sterile, but best I could do.
But they didn't issue you any sterile M5 medical bags.
No,
That's
no,
real
there wasn't such a thing.
clandestine. And was this the contents, some of it, that you carried?
Yeah, now this, as I mentioned to you earlier, I would go in heavy with stuff to stop bleeding and save the guys. But this has a lot of stuff in it that I wouldn't necessarily carry if I was on a bright light. Suture kit, no. Now suture kit, the medical equipment, surgical equipment kit on the upper left-hand corner here, I would carry and did carry that on Mike Force operations because we'd be out a long time and I could take care of a lot of stuff in the field with that. And I would also pack some suture and so forth in that thing. But I wouldn't carry it on a bright light mission because I'm not there to sew anybody up. I'm there to stop bleeding and stop puncture, stop up holes and so forth. And that, again, that wouldn't be something I would use at that situation. Some of this other stuff on the right-hand side, there are some battle dressings there. That's fine. Maybe a cravat or two is fine. The betadine, iodine stuff is okay. I can't see too much else going on there that I would use. Would take with me. I can see a whole bunch of cravats on the right side. That's fine. That's something I would carry. On the left side, near the betadine, the second pouch down looks like a little 2-inch roller gauze that might be carried as well. But as I mentioned, it was heavy for trauma. And this is a bag that a medic might carry to the field.
And this was the stable harness you carried?
Looks like, yeah.
Would you tape the some sections of it to reduce rattle, or do you just keep it as is?
No, I didn't understand the question.
Well, would you use any tape or something around, like some straps?
Yeah. For example, the rings on the top, you would secure, and you wouldn't wear the straps that come up through the crotch. You wouldn't wear those while you're walking or anything. That's for when you get evacuated. So you would reach back, pull down the clips that strap into the harness, and then bring them up through your crotch. But you would have the straps compressed, rolled up, and in the back where you could run with them.
Prior to the stable rig was the Swiss seat, right? A rope.
Swiss seat or the McGuire rig. McGuire rig was around for a little while.
Have you ever used a McGuire rig or a Swiss seat in your time?
Negative. I used a Swiss seat in Panama, but that was just a training for jungle environment.
In Panama, you were teaching South American armed forces, right?
That's at a different time.
Of course, sir.
Yeah, it was pretty funny because when I got out of Vietnam and left SOG 71, shortly thereafter I joined the Special Forces Reserve because I was in PA school, civilian PA school. But they decided in all their wisdom, after I'd been in Southeast Asia for 3.5 years in the jungle and so forth, to send me to jungle school in Panama, which I found pretty amusing. But I did. That's where I got to use the Swiss seat and so forth. It was a lot of fun, really.
And you served in Special Forces until you became a major and went to OCS, am I correct?
No, it's not incorrect. Kind of interesting. Being a PA or a physician associate, it's something that the Army didn't have initially in Special Forces. Army recognized early on the value of PAs and had them in conventional units, but SF didn't have them for a while, so I remained enlisted. Pardon me. Then finally the Army said, okay, we're going to have you PAs but we're going to do warrant officer commissions for you guys instead of regular commissions. So, okay, so I became a warrant officer, and there became slots for PA warrant officers in SF, finally. Before that, I just maintained my enlisted status. So I was a warrant officer for a while, and then finally, the Army said, okay, we're going to commission you guys. But for every year of service as a PA in the Army, you guys get a year credit for commission from your warrant officer status. I said, well, great. Except you reserve guys and National Guard, you guys get half a year. So in my 40s, I became a first lieutenant, and went to Fort Benning, Georgia, for my son's jump school, graduation jump. He decided to follow me into Special Forces. But, of course, to be SF, you have to be airborne qualified. So he went to jump school. And I showed up with permissive orders to jump with him. And the guy issuing the parachutes, the sergeant issuing the parachutes, looked at me and he said, can I see some ID, please? Because I think I was the oldest first lieutenant he'd ever seen. But having said that, I did get commissioned. I went to charm school for officers and back to SF. And when the Reserve Special Forces units closed in 1992, 3rd Battalion of the 12th Special Forces was what I was in. The 12th Special Forces closed. So I went to Civil Affairs, which is also a Special Operations unit, and served until I got out in 05.
All right. Since we're talking about post-war now, have you been able to reunite with anyone stateside from CCC or any men you served with?
Yeah, we have the Special Operations folks have a reunion called the Special Operations Association Reunion, or SOAR, and that's once a year. And I've been able to see old friends and guys I served with, and even meet some new guys from current conflicts. So it's all good.
Have you ever been able to meet any indigenous?
Yes, there are occasionally indigenous that show up at the SOAR. This last reunion, actually, one of the recon indig was sponsored by some of us to come over to the SOAR, to the reunion, and did. And it took a little doing to get his temporary visa to come over and to have the Vietnamese government release him to come over, but everything got done, and he came over. The King Bee pilots, too, the Vietnamese Air Force helicopter pilots that work closely with us, also attend the reunions, and it's great to see them and interact with them.
I guess that's about it. We've been talking for an hour now, sir.
Okay.
Happy birthday, Mr. Padgett.
Thank you.
And have a good day.
Thank you, and I appreciate you guys, your group, keeping our history alive, because as long as you do, we'll live on.
You too, sir. Have a good day.
You too. Out here.